Hey there, this is Perch. And today I want to talk about, we talked about relaunches a few days ago, and I want to talk about relaunches again, but from a different perspective. This time around, how do you know a comic's going to fail? And there's a couple instances where right out the gate, before the title is ever shipped to the store, all we've seen are solicits or a press release or some basic announcement. And immediately you can tell it's DOA on impact, and it's there's a couple clear signs that come out that it's just not going to take, and it's always kind of a sad moment because you're not really sure what to do. You don't want to push this to customers if it's going to vanish. That's no good. But it happens more times than not, and when it happens, it's actually much less about the things you hear about. It's not about um, diversity. That was the big fuss a few years ago at a con. It's not that that's causing it to kill. But it's a couple of very common, very predictable things. And the question that I've always had is, if I can figure this out, and you go to any retailer group and you will see people talking about it, everybody is able to predict pretty right away. If we're all able to predict what's going on at the publisher level, where they're not able to predict, or they why are they putting this title out, the mystery. And if there is a strategy, and there often is a strategy about, maybe you're working to get a collector trade put together that's going to go to Scholastic, so maybe the direct market, or at least the individual floppy number one issue, is not your goal. That's fine. Perfectly fine. That could very well be what the strategy is, and that's that you need to have lots of different bets. But what are these things? So, if we're an example, Mosaic is one that I probably pick on too much, but it's an example of a title that it just was kind of, it was dead on arrival. Is just the kindest best way to put it. How? So, for one thing, when it was launched, the Inhumans a little adventure had been going for a while, and it was very clear there was a lot of skepticism going in. But by the time that Mosaic was being pushed out, it was incredibly clear it was not going to go. It was the circumstances surrounding the book had poisoned the topic enough that it just was not going to be a go. And then the more peculiar one, though, was how the title was described. Um, there's a lot of you can kind of tell when there's some care being done by the editors or by the creators or the publisher around a book. You can tell when there's a little bit something extra, because the solicits will read with some unique language. It will talk up maybe some continuity, some history with a character. It will talk up kind of some big threats that are going to be facing. But if the initial solicits and the initial press is just a handful of sentences that we've heard 100 times before, like "get on board now with the latest Marvel hero, sure to amaze you," that there's nothing new about any of those statements. It's generic. You could take these sentences and you could apply it to any comic anywhere, and you'd get the exact same effect. And so when you get a solicit or a press release, and you can kind of go through and just literally take out the name of the comic and the creators and replace them with anything, and the press release still works, it still holds up, then that's a sign there's not anything truly unique about this title. And if there's not anything truly unique about this title, it means that the publisher has not figured out how to market this book successfully, has not figured out kind of the strategy to get this into the hands of consumers. And so they're shoving it out, and they're hoping that, something pops out of nowhere, is basically kind of what you're left with. Because you can gauge a title's success always by the publisher's ability to promote it in a unique and exciting way. It's kind of this old, I think I've said this in other videos, but you should be able to explain your business model. You should be able to explain your pitch in a couple sentences, and it should make sense. It may not be a good pitch, it may not be a compelling pitch, may not be something that ultimately makes money, but it should be understandable. So if you're going to put out a comic store, your 2 sentence pitches might be, um, I'm going to sell comics and pop culture goods relating to current trends in the market. And I'm going to put this store in a high retail location with a lot of foot traffic, and try and connect to movie theaters, arcades, local game centers. If there's a Dave and Buster's or something nearby, I'm going to go where I think that foot traffic is going to naturally be increased. You should be able to say, one, two, and there you go. And whether it's going to be a successful business or not, at least it's an understandable business. And so with comics, you should be able to say, here's a character going to fit a unique niche in the Marvel universe by, insert hook here, taking on the villains on their home turf, being an undercover spy and destroying evil from within, has a power set that is going to kill them off in 1 year's time, Strike Force Morituri. You should be able to have that hook. And then you could say, we're bringing creators to the table who are, this person, and here's a connection to their background that gives you the impression that they'll be able to put this book forward. And, an example of a way that you could tell a title was going to do better, doesn't necessarily mean it'll be long-term successful or anything else, was Ironheart. So when Eve Ewing came on to the book, if you looked at the solicits, if you looked at how they were pitching and promoting that title, a smart retailer knows that title's got a little bit more life in it from the publisher standpoint. They were able to kind of, pull from, here's Ironheart, we're going to create a series that's going to set her apart. So there are a couple phrases in that solicit that stood out. One was they acknowledged, kind of in a bit of a backhanded way, that the character hadn't had a lot of backstory, hadn't had a lot of fleshing out, and there was the bigger story to be told there. And the solicit acknowledged that and said, this is finally, we're going to see this, more about this character. We're going to learn more about the personality and put her up against some big threats, and also how she uniquely goes out to tackle the world. So right there, again, whether you like the title or not, they were doing things to basically inform you, here's what it is. It's not just generic superhero is in an iron suit and, it's Iron Man girl. They deliberately went away from that. And then when they got to the creative team, Eve Ewing didn't have the background in comics, which a lot of people jumped on, but you listen to how they described the author of, this is somebody who's written about schools, has had this kind of understands this age of character, some of the struggles that they're going to. They tied the writer's background and what the writer had done to what the comic was going to be. And that was another good sign. It just showed that, hey, this wasn't just random person we yanked out of the street and threw him into this book. There's a thought here. So you could read that solicit and you could go, okay, this book, is not for me, but I understand what the company's going for. And if you can understand what the company's going for, then the chances of that reboot or relaunch or new title will stick. If you read the solicit and it's like, hey, we figured it was time for another number one, so the hell with it. Bad sign. Always going to be a bad sign. And I think one thing you can actually compare the way they marketed Ironheart from the way they marketed the new Wasp book was that the Wasp title was very, very convoluted. I mean, not convoluted, just very hard to get the essence of what the book was supposed to be. It's like there's a character, it's a legacy character, but a new person wearing that suit with the name Nadia Pym, and it was all over the map, and it did not sell the strength of that character. And in some ways, it was written like it was going to ultimately be collected, go to Scholastic, and then try and sell there. That's a little bit what they were trying to do with the references to science and education. I mean, they're trying to make it kind of school distributed friendly in that way, and that's fine. Again, every strategy is a fine strategy. It can be, but you've got to execute it well. And with the Wasp, it was, I'd like to just put the Wasp up next to Ironheart and show how the book was marketed, the book was sold, the book was promoted, and how they talked up the creators and how all that was going to go. And you could tell right there that the publisher believed much more in what they were doing with Ironheart than Wasp. And by the way, the publisher is never going to come on and say, oh yeah, we actually didn't care that much about that title. Of course, they're never going to say anything like that. But it's not a surprise that in the store, even though the sales numbers are not that far apart, still Ironheart has more committed fans. It's got more polls. It's got a base that it's started to build up. Whereas Wasp continues to kind of languish a little bit in finding its audience, and the play there is clearly the secondary market through some of these other channels and not floppies. But I would also argue, and this is a whole other topic, that you shouldn't be going out with a strategy of have the comic build for Scholastic, and you just kind of give up on the floppy trade. I think that's stupid. If you can put some energy behind floppies, even if your ultimate goal, your ultimate market, where you think you're going to make your money, is off trade paperbacks and things like Scholastic or other vehicles. That's you still want to promote the comic you have. You shouldn't just have it limp out into the stores and then fend for itself. You should try and put your best foot forward. It's why I'm so hard on marketing, I think, in so many of these videos. And I know I shouldn't be, but anyway, I think that's kind of my feeling. With relaunches, you can kind of close your eyes and you can look over the book and you can say, this is going to work, this won't work, this they're not even trying, this is just clearly a limited series disguised as a main series. And you can kind of assess very rapidly what's going on there, um, for better or worse. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of relaunches feel like kind of desperate casting out attempts. You don't get that strategy. It's why I referenced Ironheart. I thought a lot of people were too hard on that book, because when you read it and you read kind of how they were leading up on what they were doing, there was clearly a plan there that there wasn't for a lot of other books. But anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe, notify, follow me on social media. Would love to get more of your topics and ideas. Thanks.